Well, great to be here. My name is Greg Bird. I work for the California Family Council as the Director of Capital Engagement, and we are happy to have a guest with us today. Her name is Laura Perry, and she's all the way from Oklahoma, and she's actually going to be testifying against a bill that's up in the Health Committee in the Assembly next Monday. And it's a bill that we are really concerned about and wanted to bring information to you about this bill. The bill is AB 2218. That's AB 2218. And this particular bill is establishing what they call a transgender wellness fund. It puts $15 million in a fund that various transgender-led nonprofits and hospitals and healthcare facilities can apply for the grant in order to supply individuals with cross-sex hormones and sex change operations. The cross-sex hormones are available for minors, and of course, adults will also have access to these cross-sex hormones and sex change operations that actually do a lot of damage to people. And that is really why Laura is here today, because she's going to personally just talk about her own life. And she actually lived as a man for 7 to 8 years, and she received a lot of these treatments. And so had a lot of negative effects in her life, and she's now come to Christian faith, and she's out talking about these. She has her own book and a website. And so Laura, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me on. It's my pleasure.
Great. Well, why don't we get right into it? So what I'm sure folks are very interested in just knowing or understanding, how is it that you came to think that you were actually a man and not a woman?
Well, I wouldn't have known back then. When I started transition, I was like many transgenders. I would have told you I was born that way. I had always been that way. And I could remember memories from very, very young and just believed it's who I was. I didn't know until much later some of the emotional wounds and the rejection and different things that I had felt. Looking back on it, it was just early lies that I believed. I had a kind of a difficult relationship with my mother. I don't blame her at all now. We have really reconciled, but at the time she had miscarried 2 boys between my brother and I. And I think that there was a part of her that longed to have those boys and that was dealing with that grief. And so she was much more attached to my brother. And so a lot of times she would reject me a lot and just tell me to go away and leave her alone. But then she was very close to my brother. So at a young age, I just began believing that maybe mom would have loved me more if I'd been a boy. Maybe she wished one of the other boys had lived instead of me. And but the more that I began to act more like a boy and begin to act like my brother, the more girls began to reject me. And then on top of that, I was sexually molested when I was 8. And then the more and more that I began to feel like I wasn't one of the girls, I was always told like that I just wasn't one of them. Or that I just felt like I was on the outside kind of looking in. Then when I was 14, I developed polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so I had this female body that I didn't want in the first place. And then it was causing me nothing but pain. I was told I would likely never get pregnant. And so I just became really angry about being a girl. And over the years, it intensified more and more. But back then, nobody really talked about being transgender. If I'd grown up in the culture we have now, I would have been one of those kids screaming and demanding to have a sex change at 8, 9, 10 years old. But I just didn't know back then, but I knew I had these feelings. And so by the time I got in college, I was deep into pornography and just a real deep sexual addiction of all kinds. And the more I fantasized about it, the more I couldn't stand the thought of being a girl. And I just thought, I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to become a man because this is who I am. And so when I began the process, the very first thing that I had to do was go to this therapist. And I wasn't interested in counseling, but it was a legal requirement. And I wanted to go down the legal route because I wanted to be legally male and I wanted to have that, that justification or that kind of the solidification of, yes, this is who I am. And so in the first in the third session, rather, the final session that was required, she put down her notebook at one point. She looked right in my eyes and she said, "Wow, you really have issues with your mom."
Is that
And
right?
yeah, and I was like, I was so stunned because I was like, wait a minute, how did we get from me talking about being a man to talking about my mother? And I just never made any kind of connection there. And I blew up at her. I said, "I'm not here to talk about my mom." There was so much anger and bitterness there. I didn't even want to talk about it. And she looked at me and she said, "So you just want me to give you your letter? And this letter would then, I could take to a doctor to start the hormone therapy." I said, "Yes, that's all I'm here for." And she said, "Okay." And she just gave me what I wanted rather than saying, "No, let's talk about this some more." She had hit the nail on the head and kind of discovered where the true problem was. But I think out of fear of backlash or whatever, she just gave in to me.
But that was one of the
And
things. It was interesting in your testimony. You said, rather than first do no harm, she allowed me to dictate my own medical treatment.
right.
And, right? I mean, that's incredible that that's happening. Why do you think that's happening among doctors?
I think a lot of it's political pressure.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me because we wouldn't do that in any other medical field.
Yeah.
If somebody has a severe heart problem, for example,
Yeah.
and they're convinced they're having a heart attack, but the doctor knows that it's, he's discovered that there's some other sort of problem, he just doesn't go start doing surgery just because that's what the person wants. He says,
Exactly.
"No, that's not what you need."
Exactly. So you started getting yourself on these hormones. Now, what
Yeah.
exactly what are these hormones that you were taking?
I don't remember I couldn't remember the name of it. It was, but I know it was testosterone.
Okay.
And it was an injection that I took every other week, and we had to self-inject it into the quadricep muscle. And so at first, I was just on cloud nine. I mean, I thought this was the greatest thing ever. People started calling me a man. And, we had friends in the LGBT community, and I had a partner that was also transgender. And so we were encouraging one another. And, it was just everything I'd ever wanted. But then after a while, I was frustrated with some of the fake things we were having to do to sort of keep this all up. And I thought, well, it'll get better after the surgeries. So I
So you
had
had
my,
surgeries on top of that.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And I had my name legally changed, but in 2009, I went to San Francisco and I had an outpatient double mastectomy. And it made me legally male. And I really thought that it was going to fix the problem, and I couldn't wait. And I liked the physical results at the time. I'd fantasized about that my whole life, basically. But I remember being devastated after a few weeks when I realized that my surgery hadn't made me a man, and it really hadn't relieved the dysphoria at all. And I thought, well, maybe it's because I still have all these female hormones, that are kind of competing. Maybe it's because I haven't had the other surgeries. Like, one day this will go away. But then,
And when you say go away, what for those who may never experience this before, what what kind of feeling were you hoping would go away?
well, I guess to put it in terms that someone can understand, I really felt like I was a man trapped in a woman's body. And so the goal really is to feel completely like a man, and to not have this sense of your body being female. And it's hard to make sense of it because it really doesn't make sense. You believe this is true, but the reality is the problem's in the mind.
Yeah,
The body's really not the problem, but you believe it is. And
that's right.
so you think that these surgeries and these things will fix it, but it never really does. So, but I was convinced at the time that it was because I had all these female hormones in the body. So I thought, well, the solution is I need to get rid of all the female organs that are producing these hormones. And so I had a full hysterectomy and an oophorectomy and no longer had the breasts. And so I thought, this is what I needed. And I was so devastated and so angry, really, when that didn't fix it either. And I was still completely aware that I had this female body. And I thought, well, once I have the final surgery, I wanted a general reassignment, and I thought that will fix it. Then I will really be a man. And when I started looking into the surgery options, I was so angry because I realized that the surgery options are horrible. Most people will be left without any sexual feeling.
And this final thing you were looking at was just getting male genitalia at that
Right.
point. I mean, yeah.
And
Wow.
I realized that they're not even real. Like the ones for females to males, the two different types of options they offer, both are horrific. Neither one are real. They're very fake. And in fact, not to be too graphic, but they have to be artificially inflated. And it's like, I knew that I was going to be reminded forever that this was not real. And even knowing all of that, and some people have had such horrible experiences. There are people I know that have had many corrective surgeries. And on top of, knowing all that, I wanted it so badly that I was still willing to roll the dice and hope I was one of the lucky ones that it would have a better result. But I'm so thankful that at the time I couldn't afford it. It would have cost me like $100,000. There's no way I was going to have that kind of money ever.
And that's what this bill is actually for. It's a fund for people who can't afford the surgeries. Right. So if you had this bill or this public fund there in Oklahoma at the time, you probably would have gone through it.
Right. And I'm so grateful that there was no fund like this. There was no grant for people to get these surgeries, because I would have done this. And imagine, just think for a moment. I know what your child or your loved one or your friend might be saying, and this is who I really am. But would you want any friend or family member to never, ever be able to experience sexual pleasure again? That's the reality for most people who go through this. On top of that, they'll become sterile. It's not like, in the very beginning, I was so delusional. And of course, we know from God's word that the more we embrace these things, and God gives us over to a reprobate mind. And I really, at the time, believed that I could be a man and have my own children. And I just never thought it through biologically. Like, if I'd really thought about it, I probably would have come to the conclusion this isn't going to work. Yeah. But they tell you you'll become a man, and you just sort of believe it, and you keep going down this rabbit hole further and further. Yeah. And I was really mad when I started realizing how fake this all was.
And and you did mention just a second ago, just God's word and a reprobate mind, and coming to terms with your faith. And now I know in your story, you talk about your mother and her faith, and how that had an influence on you. How did things change when she started getting you into reading the Bible?
Well, it was funny, actually, because my mom, most of her life, had been an extreme type A personality. She was always the one that fixed everything. And she will tell you now in her own testimony that she was very much like a Pharisee. I was raised in a very legalistic Christian home, but any problem that came up in life, she was going to fix it. And I was always like her little broken doll. She was always trying to fix and trying to force me to do what she wanted me to do. And when I came out as transgender, it really broke her. And she threw herself on the floor and just cried out to God. And she was like, I'm so tired of trying so hard. She said, I cannot fix this. And God said, finally, I've been waiting for you to admit you can't fix this. And so over the next, it was almost 9 years that I lived as transgender. Well, about 7 till I came to Christ. And over those 7 years, she really poured the word of God into her own heart. And she was so radically transformed. She and my dad both were, but especially with my mother, there was such a transformation. And so years later, she honestly wasn't trying to manipulate the situation. She was totally hands off, but she needed a website for her Bible study. And she asked, she asked me to make the website for her. And I was not a great website designer, but I had done it and I knew how to do it. And I was trying to build a portfolio to get a job doing it. And so I thought, okay, I'll do it for you. And so as I did, I decided to make a summary for each lesson. So as I began to do that, I had to read the word, I had to read the lessons. And so as I read the lessons, the word of God just began to penetrate my heart. And there's one of my life verses now is Psalm 107:20, and it says, he sent his word and healed them and delivered them from their destructions. And that's really what God began to do. And he just began to change my heart and transform me. And about 6 months went by. I was calling my mom. I went from hardly ever calling her because I didn't want to talk to her, and I was so angry and bitter with her. But over the next 6 months, I started calling her every single day after work. And so as God was changing my heart and he was revealing to me the change in my mother, and I wanted what she had. And I just cried out to God and asked him to save me. And I was radically transformed. I was so transformed that I remember I called my mom that day and I told her what had happened about these people I'd shared my faith with and all this. And I was so changed that she knew I was different just from a phone call. And, I didn't know what to do about being transgender though. Like I couldn't find anybody at the time that was really transgender and Christian. And I thought, well, I was convicted early on and I thought, well, this isn't God's will, but I don't know what to do about it. So I said, well, God, I realized this wasn't what you had for me, but there's nothing I can do about it now. This is the best I can do. So I was just trying to live as a man of God. And I was so hungry for the word. I was literally listening to a Bible study program or some kind of teaching online almost 8 hours a day at work, just all day long. And I was just growing and changing so much, but God kept convicting me and I kept thinking, I don't know what to do about this. But the Lord finally made me pretty desperate. One night he asked me, he said, if you stood before me tonight, what name would I call? And I was like, how do I answer that? I don't know. I was like, I don't want to admit that you would call me Laura, but I knew that he was not going to call me Jake. And he reminded me of John chapter 1, where it says, Jesus Christ himself is the creator. He said, you cannot claim to love me and yet reject my creation.
Wow. Say that again.
He said, he reminded me of John chapter 1, where it says that Jesus Christ himself is the creator. Because I'd sort of not thought of him as creator and as having created me. And so he said, you cannot claim to love me and yet reject my creation.
Wow.
And there was a moment there where I thought I was being condemned, and I thought he was saying, and it was probably just my own fear, why am I even bothering? If he doesn't accept me as Jake, then there's no hope. But in the most loving voice I've ever heard in all my life, he whispered to me and he said, let me tell you who you are. And it was so freeing because it was like all of a sudden I realized that I was created with an identity, with a purpose, with a plan. And God, I didn't have to be out there just adrift on the sea trying to figure out who I was. That God knew who I was, and being created with a purpose just was absolutely freeing to me. But I still didn't know.
So how did that transform you? That change of mind? I mean, because I guess previously you were listening to your feelings and to what society was saying about you, and now you had somebody else saying something different. I mean, that must have been hard to accept when you thought of yourself one way your whole life, and all of a sudden you say was it an immediate thing, or was it a struggle? Or
no, it was a struggle, because I still didn't know what to do about it. But I really began to say, okay, God, I want what you want for me. I want to be, and I didn't even know what that meant at first exactly. But I began to hate being transgender. And God really opened my eyes to the truth of the filthiness of what I was doing with some of the fake things I was doing. And just some of the things in my life revolved around this. And in fact, because of all the legal stuff that was going on, I signed the boycott Target pledge from the American Family Association before I left the lifestyle, because I knew how against God's design this was. But I kept crying out to God, and I said, God, I don't know how to fix this. And I finally was angry, and I said, what am I supposed to do? Just show up at work in a dress and say, just kidding, I'm really a girl. Sorry, I've lied to y'all for 4 years. Because at the time, they didn't know that I was transgender. I was living as if I was male. Yeah. And these were people that I really cared about in my office. And so one night, though, for like 2 months, I begged the Lord with all my heart, genuinely. I begged the Lord to just take my life and let me die, because I saw no way out. And I could picture myself in this deep, dark pit that I couldn't get out of. And I could see the light at the top, but there was no way out. I couldn't reach it. And so he reminded me of Matthew chapter 16, verses 24 through 26, where it says, if anyone will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever loses his life for my sake shall find it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and yet forfeit his own soul? Or what shall he give in exchange for his soul? And at that moment, I thought, what if I hold on to this that I want so badly? Because even though I hated being transgender, I really couldn't stand the thought of being a girl. It wasn't like at that moment that I loved being a girl. It's just that I wanted to obey God. And I wanted to be who he said he was. But the thought of being female was so painful that I had a clear vision of Jesus Christ getting down on one knee. He reached his hand down into this horrible pit I was in, and he said, do you trust me? And I remember thinking, he's asking me to leave everything. And that's exactly what he wanted. And I literally I sold everything, walked away from my partner, my job, my financial security, everything I had and owned, and moved home with my mom and dad with no plan other than I'm going to obey Jesus. And I couldn't believe, I had no idea at the time how much he would set me free. Just a radical transformation in me. And like the long hair and the jewelry and pretty shirts is not an act. Like it's so funny now. People do not even believe that I was ever transgender. It's been so far removed from me. And I have truly embraced being female as God has peeled off the layers of the emotional wounds and things that caused this in the first place. And that's the thing that people don't get with transgenderism. It's just like drugs and alcohol and anything else that people use to escape. It's all about escaping pain and escaping who you are. And it's rather than facing that pain and dealing with it, it's a way of escaping. And so once the Lord,
I think that makes sense to a lot of people, if they think about it, right? I mean, and if you know someone is struggling with an addiction, you know, most people realize you wouldn't encourage them to embrace the addiction, right?
No
right?
parent would give their child heroin.
No, exactly.
Right.
And so it's the same thing this way. So the loving thing to do, and here's where our legislature deceives people. They say the loving thing to do is to affirm and to provide these treatments, you know, free of charge, right? So that they act as though they are doing a loving thing, but really what they're doing is harming people. And I think some people have been convinced they're doing the right thing. They actually say that they think they're saving people from committing suicide. I mean, we hear that all the time, that if you want to prevent people from committing suicide, that you need to affirm someone's gender identity the way they perceive it. But from your story, it sounds like, you know, you're glad that your mother and other folks within the Christian community gently persuaded you otherwise.
Yeah. In fact, the suicide rates, now these studies are arguable, but studies have found that many are suicidal after surgery, not before. In fact, some studies have shown that it's far higher. And I can attest in my own life and the lives I've known of some others that suicidal thoughts were far worse afterwards. Because when you've invested everything in your life, all your money, you've pushed away your family, you've alienated people, you've changed jobs, whatever, all these legal changes, and you've gone through all this for years usually, and usually about bankrupted yourself, and then you realize it's not real, and you've made all these changes that are permanent without the grace and mercy of God, I don't know where I would be. I absolutely believe he preserved my life. Because there were times that I was truly suicidal because I saw no way out.
No, and we're hearing more and more stories of transgender regret. Mm-hmm. We're hearing more and more folks speak up, and when they realize that, you know, they initially thought it worked, but after years go on, they realize their issues are still remaining. And so much appreciate you coming on and telling your story. So much appreciate you actually going to be speaking. Hopefully the legislators will listen to your story and realize that what they thought was helpful and kind to those who are struggling with their gender identity, that they are not offering them hope by offering them these operations and drugs. And so that's what we hope to expose, the truth. And I hope people hear about how it was Jesus that transformed you. And I hope
Amen.
everybody in the whole Capitol building learns that story as well.
Yep.
So I know that you have an organization you work with and a book and a website. So why don't you close by mentioning those things?
Yeah, I work for First Stone Ministries in Oklahoma City, and we are a ministry of sexual redemption. So we try to help anybody that has, whether it's sexual addiction, pornography, LGBT issues, just any kind of sexual addiction. And we've got a website with tons of resources if you're not here local in the area. And then my website is transgender2transformed.com. And you can find my articles and my book there as well.
Fabulous. Well, thanks so much for being with us. And I know we'll talking to you in the future.
Yep.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. You as well. God bless.